And Magnus looking calmer now. We saw him raging earlier, but the only thing more dangerous than Magnus Carlsen is an angry
Yeah,
Magnus
that's
Carlsen.
right. Yeah, Evian should sign a deal with him after that finale. Another Catalan, and Alireza did have a little bit of time during the break to patch up some holes. He plays a completely different approach against the Catalan. Earlier, we saw in the previous game the C7 C6 approach, which is recommended by a lot of books. Here we see a wide open center with an early C5 strike. Very risky approach by Alireza. He better know this well because I've seen Black lose a lot of games out of the opening in this line.
To me, the explanation for this kind of an opening reply to the Catalan instead of a more solid strategic fight is that Alireza wants to stick to his style of play. He wants to, regardless of needing only a draw to win the match, he's got the black pieces, this is the Armageddon, you play with time odds, no increment on the clock. But he's saying that I want to rely on what is my biggest strength, which are these kind of positions. Because the one game, Daniel, Alireza did get outplayed in was the Catalan, where he again went for a cautious approach. So I like this switch up a lot by Black.
Also, for people just tuning in, there's no increment in the Armageddon, so flagging is very much on the table. That's why the time advantage is so much more significant without the 2-second increment. But the player's primary allegiance is to the position on the board. You can't over-rely on your time advantage because we know what Alireza is capable of with just a couple seconds on his clock, with or without increment. Right now, it's an early critical moment for Magnus. Firouzja threatening c takes d4. Magnus just spits in the face of that threat. He says, come at me, take my pawn. He's going to drop his queen back and then recapture it with his knight, presumably. I don't know. I like the way that Alireza has handled the opening. His knight can come into the game. It doesn't feel like Magnus has a big advantage, maybe any advantage at all in this wide open center position.
And it's a must-win game for Magnus. He has to win with the white pieces in the Armageddon. If not, it goes into the grand final reset. But right now, it's just started. And we see that Alireza, with his bid, did not have to give up too much of a deficit on the clock to get the result odds. So I think it was a really smart psychological bid by him. And look at that. He just keeps going. He plays e5, pushing the white knight back before carrying on with the development. So far, Daniel, it looks like white's the one who's got a little bit of a cagey setup. The activity on black side, but the e5 pawn is hanging. Do you need to defend it, or can you go for activity with bishop to f5?
Well, the e5 pawn is hanging, but the b3 square is also hanging. And I think Alireza investing his time trying to calculate his way to just like a forced draw. Bishop f5 is what is on my mind. Bishop e6 is sort of the sister idea, right? Trying to put all of your eggs in the knight b3 basket. And if Magnus is forced to play an incredibly passive move like knight b1 to d2 to cover this square, that's really, really bad news for him. Alireza could also send his e-pawn down the board. And yet, I think Magnus has to play knight b to d2. There's no way that he can get away with taking on e5 and allowing knight b3 because he just loses his entire queen side in the event of a knight jump to b3. So very encouraging signs early for Firouzja. Magnus is maintaining his 2-minute time advantage, but definitely no advantage on the board.
And you can't even think about picking up that pawn after a queen trade because queen takes queen. I don't even think that black needs to take it with the king back because you could anyway recapture with the rook. And the idea of knight b3 stays alive because white's only square is the rook to a2, Daniel. In that case, it comes under fire with that bishop on e6. So a nice move there by Alireza. Bishop to e6 will now eye that a2 square where the rook will be forced on. I'm really liking clock situation, whatever it is, result odds. I really like this as an opening outcome for black in whichever format.
And I'm really surprised that we're not seeing knight b to d2 faster for Magnus Carlsen. He might be spending some time calculating knight e5. He actually grabs the queen first. So I was going to point this out. You can trade queens and then play knight b to d2. Now, that doesn't mean Magnus is giving up his winning chances. He just believes that he's got more chances in the endgame as Firouzja dives into b3. Rook to b1 is Magnus's idea. This is why he planted a knight on c3 to vacate the b1 square. Bishop f5, though. What's his answer to that? Is it e4?
I was just going to say, aren't you losing material? Because bishop f5, e4, you just grab the e4 pawn.
He's going to have to sack the exchange. He has to play knight takes e5 here. And maybe this is what Magnus planned all along. Sacking the exchange, getting a bishop to c6, but I'm skeptical about all this. He might have also overlooked the move bishop f5. And Tanya, I'm going to put this on the board. The rook is trapped. The typical response is e4, but after knight takes e4, we're not seeing an answer to the threat of knight takes c3. So the other option is just to sack the exchange. But is this really a serious winning attempt? Is Alireza really risking after something like bishop to d6? Maybe he is. Maybe the knight is jumping into c6. White's minor pieces are very strong. But it's decision time for Magnus Carlsen, and his winning chances are in serious question here.
I'm just surprised that the evaluation bar doesn't give more of an edge for black in this position, which makes me think that there has to be a way that white gets enough compensation here. And it's not so clear to my eye, at least, Daniel, where does Magnus actually find that compensation? It looks like he's struggling as well. As he takes a little bit of a pause, he takes some time. How does he keep the balance here? He does go for knight takes pawn, so step one done correctly.
Yeah, and I mean, people need to understand that sacking an exchange is not as radical as sacking a minor piece, right? He's got a pawn for the exchange. He also throws in an intermezzo on c6 to make it hard for Firouzja to get his bishop out. At the same time, your pieces are in jeopardy. So Firouzja can also grab the bishop on c1. He's got a chance to do that. I think that he should take that chance. But I like what Magnus has done here. He's gotten the position as chaotic as possible. Basically, the shoe is on the other foot, Tanya. This is what Alireza was trying to do in the previous game. Now, Magnus is in a must-win situation in this game, of course. He'll have another chance even if he loses, but can he keep things complicated? An excellent move by Firouzja. King up to e6, hitting the knight, opening up the bishop. Magnus is on the cusp here. He is on the ropes. And knight d4? Ugh. Oh, knight f4 check. Okay, saving grace there.
But you just fall back with the king, right? Because you're still attacking the bishop and you're still attacking that e2 pawn because g5 is a threat on the board.
Oh.
So knight d4 still feels very nice to me. It's the move you want to make.
Knight d4. There it is. King f5. Excellent move. That king is super safe. g5. Magnus is going down here.
Oh my gosh.
Look at this play by Firouzja. Really so confident. Oh,
just
God.
Bishop h3 check ideas, but he blocks it. At least the knight on f4 now is solid, but the bishop can get to it. Comes out, attacks with a tempo. Look at the speed now with which Magnus is playing because he knows the clock is his biggest ally in this position.
Yeah, but that's his only ally because right now Firouzja is piling up on this e-pawn. You do not want to play e3. If you have to play e3, you can bid goodbye to your winning chances. You're giving up the f3 square. And at that point, the game is ultimately played for two results. Right now, it's still played with two results. I don't see a way to defend against the threat of bishop takes f4 and knight takes e2 check. Let's not forget, Magnus needs to win this game. He cannot simply draw it, and e4 check allows Firouzja to just sack the exchange back on e4 with a dominant endgame. This is absolute mastery by the 20-year-old French Grandmaster. Magnus needs to find some way to keep this game going, and I'm not seeing it right now. Maybe bishop e3.
Can you give a check instead? Is e4 an option here?
Because the problem is e4 knight takes e4. You might have to play e4, but Alireza is going to sacrifice the exchange back and then just have a much better endgame, which is essentially unlosable.
Yes.
This could be over.
Everything. You've got more pieces on the board, more activity on the board. Daniel, is this also a bit of a psychological battle right now? I mean, Magnus, we know that he's one of those guys, maybe he doesn't believe in psychology, he only believes in good moves, as Fischer once said, and his chess is so good. But the fact what we just saw, the match could have been over in that last round. It was such a massive turnaround in that last moment. Is that also something you're fighting in your head?
As professional as Magnus is, you're still subject to the same human pressures and the same emotional pressures as the next guy over, right? So, it doesn't matter if you're Magnus or Schmagnus, how many tournaments you've won. He has to find it within himself right now to push all of those negative emotions aside and keep this game going. But Alireza believes that he can do it. Look at the speed of Firouzja's play. F3 by Magnus was the best move, the only way to keep this game going. But what about knight takes e2 check? Trading more pieces.
That essentially now Alireza just has free time odds. The clocks have leveled out.
And all he has to do is not lose. All he has to do is not lose. As you're saying, Tanya, knight d5. Normally, he would be playing this for a win, right? Normally, we would be saying that it's a game for two results. Black cannot lose this game. Magnus needs a mouse slip. He needs a miracle.
Right now, maybe he needs to calm down, and he's not being able to. He just rages on.
And that's what happens when you're tilted, right? You're tilted, you calm down briefly, and then there's another trigger, right? You get another disappointing result, and it sends you back into that rage tailspin. Alireza is just a couple of moves away, a couple of traps away, let's say, from winning this game, drawing this game, which is essentially winning this game. Can he play knight e3? That's the big question on my mind.
Yes, he can.
What?
And yes, he does.
No, this Magnus is just not right. He's not Magnus right now. He just gave this one away, and Alireza, with some brilliant play, is not going to lose this game. This is just, you can offer a draw at this point.
He's up in exchange. He shut down that white bishop on c1. If you take it, that's game over. The rook slides in. The b2 pawn falls with a double attack. Magnus Carlsen, I think right now, is coming terms to the fact that he's got to play the grand final reset.
Yep. And he's losing, right? He's losing on the board. It's not like, oh, it's a 50-50 game. If Firouzja just plays a6 right now and protects the b5 pawn, in any other circumstance, Alireza is declining a draw with the black pieces here. He's up a full exchange for no compensation. In order to make a draw clinically, all he has to do is get this knight out of the danger zone, maybe plant it on c4, and then just sit. Sit and avoid losing on time.
But I love what he's doing. Just everything that he's done so far, it's been played out to perfection. He trades off his only weakness on the board, the f7 pawn, takes up more pawns off the board. It's an exchange down for Magnus for a pawn. The bishop in c1 doesn't play. The knight always has the c4 square to jump back to if you make a move like king to e3. The king gets
There was one way to blunder. There was one way to blunder, Tanya. Knight b3, bishop g5, but again, Firouzja with 3 minutes on the clock. This isn't like the previous game. This isn't like the previous game where it's tactical and you're just used to Magnus being perfect. Here, there are no tricks, and Magnus is furious. He's bubbling over, but one way or the other, he's going to have to coach himself, calm himself down, talk himself off a ledge, because he's not winning this game.
He's not winning this game. If he has to win the championship, he has to do it in the grand final reset. It's usually, we'd never write off Magnus, right? Until the game is over. It's really not over till it's over. But I think, Daniel, this one, I really don't believe that Alireza at least doesn't get a draw out of it.
I mean, one miracle is enough for me. We had that miracle in the previous game. Again, take those question marks with a grain of salt. Remember that Alireza is not trying to win this game. That changes your strategy. If this was a Tata Steel game, he would be playing this very differently from the black side. He might even be going a5 and b4. Right now, Magnus's only slim hope, either a mouse slip, an internet disconnection, or Alireza gets too nervous, takes too much time, and then gets flagged. Alireza's not going to get flagged.
But he needs to make a move. They're both touching the 2-minute mark. I think Magnus is going to play this on till the end. He's not offering a draw. He's not accepting a draw. Resigning is out of the question. I don't think it's that I'm just getting ready for my second grand final reset. Let's get this off. Because this is going to be a bit of about mouse skills. It's going to be a bullet in just a few moments. And Daniel, I think the clock will play a role. But Alireza, his pieces are just getting more and more active.
If anybody's capable of this comeback, it's Magnus Carlsen. The problem is bishop c2, knight e3 is what I'm not understanding. Bishop c2, knight e3. Knight e3 sets up the threat of rook f1 and rook d1. So I'm not seeing how Magnus keeps winning chances alive.
Can you take on h7? Take the knight first?
Yeah, but king f4. But that's a draw. You've made a draw. Congrats, but you haven't won.
And we're seeing that being played out. King to f4. Nicely called out, Daniel. That is his match strategy. He doesn't want more than a draw at this point. King g5.
Listen, it's easy to blunder. Like rook d8. You mouse slip, you play rook c8, you lose. So let's wait for this game to over.
One of the best in the world.
b4. Let's do it. Let's go.
Are you really sensing some chances for white here?
No.
But, as long as there are pieces and the rook cannot sacrifice itself for the bishop ever, because even if you manage to pick up the 2 pawns in the bargain, white's king is very close to the queen side pawns. So Alireza will never be able to go into a complete king pawn ending, which is a draw, by sacrificing his rook back for that bishop. As long as the moves have to keep going, but it's Magnus who's now low on time. It's 1.5 minutes for him.
But the other problem is Alireza could even if things go so wrong that he has to give up his rook. He can give up his rook. If he can eliminate the G and B pawns, Magnus will have the wrong color pawn. There is literally the only way that this game ends in a win for Magnus is a mouse slip. And Alireza is a premier blitz and bullet player. Even if he had 15 seconds with no increment, he'd have a chance to draw this. This is an Alireza moment right now. It's a Kodak moment. Is it a mouse slip moment?
It's not. And the moves are being repeated. But Magnus, he shifts it up. But the thing is, the king has got no way in. The black rook remains on the 4th rank, tying down that white king to not surpass enemy lines, not go over to the 5th rank. It's impossible for Magnus to make progress here.
My cat could draw this, and I don't even have a cat. Just take on G4, get your king back to H6. This is too easy for Mr. Firouzja. And still, look at how he's taking his time. He's not rushing.
Rook B8.
And Magnus is resigned. That's it. We're on to a grand final reset, Tanya.
And that could have been a draw, but Magnus just resigns because the result is the same. Magnus had to win. Alireza Firouzja does it. He does the impossible. He takes it to the grand final reset. What a match this has been. Daniel, he's done it before.